The National Defense Strategy lists rebuilding the readiness of the military as one of its key components. One suggestion is moving combatant commanders away from a Jenga model where forces are moved in and out without a lot of consideration for the risks of each move. Mackenzie Eaglen's resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. All right, you got me with the Jenga analogy. I didn't know anybody still played that game, Mackenzie, although I guess as a result of the quarantine, everybody's playing every game there is. You wrote this piece a couple of weeks ago, and I note that there are a number of references in here as to what Secretary Esper should do or should not do. We don't have one of those anymore. So what does that mean moving forward for the things that you're suggesting here?
It means that the incoming administration has a long to-do list based not just on this article, but other issues as well. And one of the first tasks we're going to need to undertake clearly is to relook the national defense strategy and reaffirm or change it as needed to prioritize the threats. But really related to that is a global roles and missions review for all of the military services to find out where there's duplication, where there can be consolidation, where there's overlap, and you know, the deployment overall of forces and what needs to be changed or not. I think the Biden administration will also eventually get to a potential review of Goldwater Nichols, because that's really the heart of the matter here is, you know, all the goodness for all the jointness and helpful byproducts of that legislation. I think now we're starting to see some of the consequences, and it's time for a relook decades later.
It is useful that you have great detail in this piece in War on the Rocks, and one of the subheads, one of the sections is titled "Reining in Sprawling Mini Pentagons," easy for me to say, and you ask for consideration of 2 points: managing the expansion of the combatant commanders, including staff and budgets, you note, and curbing combatant commanders' unbounded demands for U.S. forces. To the second point, Mackenzie, that's not entirely up to the combatant commanders, is it? That's also up to the threat landscape.
That's absolutely right. So, you know, and there also needs to be signaling from leadership at the Pentagon that the goal here isn't to eliminate all risk. Zero risk is one of the reasons that there's this perception that commanders need forces for everything below the, you know, level of conflict for presence missions around the globe each day. And it's wearing out man and machine too quickly during a time when the department needs to reorient towards this longer term competition with China in particular. So there's no incentive right now for combatant commanders to do that. So then you have to ask yourself, well, why did they think the perception of zero risk is reality? And then what are the tasks and what associated with it in the theater or the campaign or the operational concept plans that's driving all of this work?
You write very extensively with data about the expansion that's gone on. To the first point that you make there, and you reference the 2013 cuts that Secretary Hagel at the time announced, where he was going to cut the OSD billets 20%. That doesn't seem to have gone very far or very well, and it indicates to me that cutting at the Pentagon traditionally is very difficult, isn't it?
It is very difficult, and they often wind up cutting the wrong things, right? So Joint Forces Command went away when Secretary, at the time, Jim Mattis was running it. And then it turns out in 2018 with the new defense strategy, the Pentagon gave away all of its brain power to do joint warfighting concept development, exactly what is needed right now, and one of the reasons it still hasn't been released within the Department of Defense. But really, yeah, here I'm focusing on the regional combatant commanders and their unyielding demand for presence. I mean, there is a budgetary issue and a manpower issue that these commands staff maybe 45,000 people domestically and overseas, and that warrants its own scrub. They are sprawling mini Pentagons as opposed to lean warfighting headquarters, as Arnold Conaro calls it. But really, it's about the incentive structure for their demand and how it does not match or support forces and what they need right now, which is to rebuild readiness and focus on innovation for the long-term competition.
All right, take me to Jenga and how that fits with this narrative, Mackenzie.
So I came up with that idea because I was reading again the new Air Force Chief of Staff's vision, accelerate change or lose, and in it he talks about sharing risk better between and among the services and combatant commanders, again, here, the heart of the matter is getting risk to zero and why that perception exists. And General Brown talks about how, you know, currently, you know, he just came as head of Pacific Command before he became the chief, as you know. And he talks about, from I think his perspective in Asia, that, you know, right now we just kind of plug in and pull out forces all around the world without any sense of whether one request for forces over here is hurting another service over there, or how the need to do something now might be actually harming the 5-year budget plan for how the Department of Defense plans and programs its future, as you know, over 5 years. And so I basically call it a global Jenga model that really doesn't seem to have any broader rhyme or reason, and that this really falls on the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that he needs to do a better job of ensuring that, you know, again, we're not wearing out man and machine too quickly, that the use of one service isn't going to harm another service, and that the need to do something now in one budget year isn't going to hurt something 5 years later for that same service.
Mackenzie Eaglen, thanks very much for coming on. Always enjoy having you.
My pleasure. Thanks.